I still remember the sound of laughter that night, not because it was joyful, but because it was cruel. My brother, Ethan, stood in the center of the room, surrounded by people who clapped and cheered for his every word. And then, in front of everyone, he looked right at me and said, "Some people are just born to be the family's disappointment." The crowd erupted. My mother smiled awkwardly, my father looked away, and I just stood there, frozen. I had spent my whole life protecting this family's name, carrying their secrets, fixing their mistakes. And yet, in that moment, I was nothing but their favorite punchline. I could feel my cheeks burning, my throat tightening, but I didn't speak. I just smiled, the same way I always did when humiliation was easier to hide than truth. If only they knew what I was hiding. If only Ethan knew that the sister he mocked was the one holding the secret that could destroy him. Cliffhanger. That night, he buried my dignity with his laughter, but I was about to bury his pride with the truth. From the outside, the Ross family looked perfect, the kind of family people envied. My father, Patrick Ross, was known in town as a man of respect, the kind who never raised his voice in public and always dressed in crisp white shirts that smelled of authority. My mother, Helen, carried herself with practiced grace, her smile rehearsed, her words polished. Together, they built an image of unity, of success, of honor. And for years, I believed in that image too. Inside our home, however, respect was a fragile thing. It was measured by achievements, appearances, and who made the family look better. And in that silent competition, my brother Ethan always won. At the dinner table, my father would ask about Ethan's job, his new car, his promotion. When I spoke about my work, the small charity projects I managed, the lives I tried to improve, he would nod politely, then change the subject. "That's nice, Maya," he'd say, "but Ethan's deal might bring real success to the family." I learned to swallow my words after that. Ethan had a way of filling every room, loud, confident, charming. People loved him. He had our mother's approval and our father's pride, and he knew it. Sometimes, he'd tease me lightly in front of guests, calling me the serious one, or the family philosopher. It always got a laugh. I laughed too, because it was easier than letting them see how much it hurt. But it wasn't just his words. It was the way everyone looked past me, as if I were a shadow in my own home. A few weeks before his engagement, our parents hosted a family dinner. The living room shimmered with gold lights, the table heavy with dishes I'd cooked. Helen fussed over Ethan's fiancée, Lena, adjusting her jewelry and smiling proudly. "Isn't she lovely?" she whispered to me, "just perfect for our family name." I nodded, pretending to agree, while Lena's smirk lingered a little too long. She had that polished charm that made people like her instantly, until they noticed the small things. The way her compliments felt sharp. The way she watched people, calculating. As dinner ended, Ethan raised a glass and said, "To my parents, for everything. And to Maya, for, well, making the food." Laughter followed. I forced a smile again, but this time, something inside me shifted. That night, as I cleared the plates alone, Aunt Clara came to help. She placed a gentle hand on my shoulder and said quietly, "You can't keep giving your voice to people who don't value your silence." Her words stayed with me long after she left. In a family that worshipped perfection, truth was considered rebellion. And I had spent years being obedient. But obedience was slowly turning into invisibility, and I was starting to feel it break. Cliffhanger. What I didn't know then was that beneath Ethan's perfect life, beneath my father's pride and my mother's smiles, something ugly was already rotting. The real trouble began when my father announced he was transferring part of his company shares to Ethan before the wedding. He said it casually over breakfast, as if he were discussing the weather. "It's only right," he explained. "Ethan will carry the family business forward. Maya has her charity work." My spoon froze mid-A. My charity work, the same work that once helped save our company's reputation during a scandal, had suddenly become nothing more than a side hobby. "Dad," I began softly, "I've managed the community accounts for years. Shouldn't we discuss this?" He cut me off with a wave of his hand. "You're too emotional for business, Maya. You do good things, but Ethan has vision." That word, vision, echoed in my mind like an insult. Ethan smirked from across the table, tapping his watch. "Don't take it personally, sis. Not everyone is meant to lead." Helen, our mother, looked at me with that familiar blend of pity and annoyance. "Maya, please don't start an argument. This is supposed to be a happy week." Happy for them? Maybe. For me, it was just another reminder that love in this family came with conditions. That afternoon, while everyone was busy finalizing the engagement decorations, I sat in the study going through the financial reports I managed for the company's outreach programs. It was routine, until I noticed something odd. A large transfer had been made from the company's charity fund to an investment account under Ethan's name. My heart sank. The amount wasn't small. It could ruin our foundation's credibility if discovered. I printed the document, my hands trembling. Was it possible Ethan had stolen funds just to impress Lena's family? The same Lena who paraded around calling herself the future Mrs. Russ, boasting about the lavish gifts and her diamond engagement ring? I confronted Ethan privately that evening. Ethan, why did you take money from the charity fund? He laughed. Relax. It's a temporary transfer. I'll put it back after the wedding. Do Mom and Dad know? I asked. He shrugged. They don't need to. You're the only one who'd notice anyway. Don't make this a scene. Something in his tone broke me. Not guilt. Not fear. Just arrogance. You're risking our entire reputation, I said, my voice shaking. He leaned closer, smirking. And you'll keep quiet, because that's what you do best, Maya. Stay quiet, stay invisible. For the first time, I couldn't breathe. Every insult, every dismissal, every moment of being overlooked, it all collided inside me. I wanted to scream, but instead, I turned and walked away. That night, my mother came into my room. She must have sensed my anger. Maya, she said gently, Ethan's success keeps this family respected. Don't let jealousy ruin that. Jealousy? I whispered, staring at her. Do you really think that's what this is? She sighed, touching my cheek. You're too sensitive, darling. Not everything is about fairness. When she left, I sat there in the dark, staring at the printed file in my hand. The evidence of Ethan's betrayal. I thought about tearing it apart, staying silent again, letting peace pretend to exist. But Aunt Clara's words echoed in my mind. Truth doesn't ruin families, lies do. I placed the document carefully into an envelope. Cliffhanger. The next time Ethan mocked me, I decided I wouldn't just listen, I'd make sure the whole world heard what he'd done. The weeks leading up to Ethan's engagement felt like living inside a performance, one where everyone knew their lines except me. Our house buzzed with laughter, guests, and endless praise for the perfect couple. My mother glowed with pride. My father barked orders like a general preparing for battle. Ethan soaked in every compliment as if he were royalty. And me? I was the invisible worker behind the curtain, making sure the show went on. Whenever relatives came over, my mother would introduce me with that tight, polite smile. This is Maya, our elder one. She helps with all the arrangements. Helps. Never leads. Never belongs. Just helps. I tried to stay composed, to keep the peace. But each day, their small cuts dug deeper. One evening, during a family rehearsal dinner, Lena's family arrived early. The room glittered with lights and expensive centerpieces I had spent hours arranging. As soon as they walked in, Ethan grinned and gestured toward me. Maya's our behind-the-scenes hero, he announced, clinking his glass. She's great with humble tasks. The room laughed. Even Lena chuckled softly, her arm looped through his. I forced a smile. Someone has to do the work while you take the credit, right? Ethan froze for a moment, just long enough for me to see the flicker of annoyance in his eyes. Then he recovered, smirking. Always so serious, sis. That's why no man wants to marry you. The laughter this time was louder. My mother didn't stop it. My father looked away. The humiliation burned through me like fire, but I kept my voice calm. Maybe it's better to be alone than to marry someone for a price, I said quietly. Lena's smile faded for just a second. Ethan's jaw tightened. But before anything else could happen, my mother interrupted, changing the subject, smoothing things over, as always. Later that night, I went to my room, shut the door, and finally let my tears fall. Not just from what Ethan said, but because I realized something far worse. My pain had become entertainment for them. I opened my drawer and pulled out the envelope, the one containing proof of Ethan's stolen funds. My fingers trembled as I touched it. I could destroy him with this. But then I saw my reflection in the mirror. Tired eyes, cracked dignity, a woman who had spent her life pleasing people who never truly saw her. I didn't want revenge. I wanted respect. But maybe, in this family, Truth was the only language respect understood. The next day, Aunt Clara visited again. She could sense the tension like a storm in the air. She looked at me and said softly, "Maya, storms don't always destroy. Sometimes they clean the air." I asked her, "What if the storm tears everything apart?" She smiled faintly. "Then maybe it wasn't worth keeping." That night, I noticed Ethan acting nervous, whispering to Lena. He avoided my eyes. Something was wrong. Later, I overheard them in the hallway. Lena's voice was sharp. "If your sister opens her mouth, it's over, Ethan. You fix this, now." Ethan hissed back, "She won't. She never does." He was right, I never did. Until now. The night of Ethan's engagement party was supposed to be a celebration of love and family. At least, that's what the invitations said. But for me, it felt like walking into my own execution. Every chandelier sparkled a little too brightly, every laugh rang a little too loudly. The hall was filled with faces I'd known since childhood, people who had seen me grow, people who once called me the sensible Russ girl. Now, they barely noticed I was there. I arrived early to help with the final touches, as usual. My mother was busy fussing over the flowers and the seating chart. "Maya, make sure Lena's family is seated near the stage," she said, not even looking at me. "And please, don't wear anything too dark. It's a happy night." I looked down at the soft blue dress I'd chosen. Elegant, simple, but modest. She didn't notice. She never did. By the time the guests arrived, Ethan was already glowing in the center of attention. His arm wrapped around Lena, his grin effortless. My father gave a proud speech about the future of the Russ family, pausing only to pat Ethan's shoulder. I stood beside Aunt Clara, clapping mechanically. Then, out of nowhere, Ethan's voice filled the microphone. "Before we move on, I'd like to thank my sister," he said, motioning for me to come forward. For a moment, my heart softened. Maybe he was trying to make peace, to show some kindness. I walked to the stage, my steps trembling but hopeful. Ethan smiled that charming smile of his, the one the world loved, and said, "Maya's been so patient all these years. Always taking care of us, always single." The audience chuckled. "Maybe after this wedding, we'll find someone brave enough to handle her seriousness." Laughter exploded around the room. Cameras flashed. Even Lena giggled, covering her mouth with fake politeness. I felt something inside me crack. The laughter blurred into a dull roar, and for a moment, I thought I might collapse. My throat tightened, my palms shook. My mother avoided my eyes. My father, he was smiling. It was all a joke to them. My dignity was entertainment. I forced a smile, leaned toward the microphone, and whispered, "You always did enjoy making people laugh, Ethan." My voice didn't tremble. It was calm, almost chilling. But inside, something had shifted permanently. After the speeches, I escaped to the balcony, the night air sharp against my skin. I could still hear them laughing inside, my family, my blood, the people I had loved, defended, and sacrificed for. And yet, here I was, humiliated before them all. Aunt Clara found me standing there, tears silently streaking down my face. "Child," she said softly, "some people mistake cruelty for confidence. Don't become like them." I shook my head. "I've spent my whole life protecting their image, Aunt Clara." "For what? They never saw me as one of them." Her eyes softened. "Then maybe it's time they see who you really are." That night, I went home early, but the laughter still echoed in my head. I couldn't sleep. Every word replayed like a cruel melody, too serious, single, family disappointment. Around midnight, I walked into my father's office. The lights were off, but the room smelled of his cologne, the same one he wore whenever he gave long speeches about pride and honor. I sat at his desk and stared at the family portrait on the wall, Ethan in the center, me on the edge, almost cropped out. It felt symbolic. I opened my bag and took out the envelope, the proof of Ethan's theft. My fingers brushed against the papers, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilt. I felt clarity. They had taken my voice, my place, my respect, but not my truth. The next morning, when I came down for breakfast, my father barely looked up from his newspaper. "Maya, I think it's best if you don't attend the engagement contract signing tonight," he said coldly. "Why?" I asked. Helen sighed. "Lena's parents feel your emotional nature might bring unnecessary attention. We need this union to go smoothly.
My heart sank.
So now I'm an embarrassment too.
Ethan smirked. It's not personal, sis.
You just don't fit the picture. I stood there, frozen, exiled from my own family's celebration.
My mother returned to her tea as if nothing had happened.
I turned to leave, but before I walked out the door, I looked at Ethan and said quietly, "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." He laughed, brushing me off.
Sure, Maya.
Whatever you say.
But this time, I wasn't bluffing.
After that morning, after my father told me to stay away like I was some inconvenient guest, something inside me stopped folding. The hurt didn't disappear, but it sharpened into purpose. I stopped asking myself if I deserved respect and started planning how to make them answer for taking it.
First, I stopped acting alone.
I called Olivia and told her everything, not the dramatic version, the facts, the transfer, the dates, the receipts I'd printed.
She didn't gasp or beg me to let it go.
She said, "Good. Let's get it in order."
Her steady voice felt like a hand on my back.
Aunt Clara became my quiet counsel. She reminded me that truth only matters if someone sees it. Noah, the family friend who used to be a better friend to me than my own blood, agreed to help with verification. He said, "If those numbers are real, we can prove the paper trail." People can ignore words, but they can't ignore documents.
We worked like surgeons.
I made copies, organized a timeline, and mapped out how the money had moved, the date, the account, the suspicious temporary transfer that never returned. Olivia scanned everything and created a clean packet. Noah checked the metadata on the files, timestamps that matched the nights Ethan had been sneaking into the accounts. Aunt Clara found people who had overheard Lena pressuring Ethan about expensive gifts. She whispered, "Those small details are the cracks. We'll widen them." Planning wasn't just practical, it was emotional repair.
I stopped waiting for anyone to rescue me.
I wrote letters to myself, short lines of what I would finally say if given the chance.
I practiced my voice until it felt like armor.
"I will speak," I wrote.
"I will not beg.
I will hold proof." I slept less but felt clearer. The fear was still there, a low current, but now it made me careful, not paralyzed.
There were moments I almost backed out.
I thought of my mother's face when she discovered the scandal, of the way my father's pride could break into something dangerous. Aunt Clara squeezed my hand and said, "Truth will hurt them. But lies have already destroyed you."
That was the blunt mercy I needed. The plan had to be undeniable and public.
Private confrontations could be hushed, whispers could be bought. I needed a moment where the evidence could not be folded away like a napkin. The engagement contract signing, when both families and the media-worthy guests would be present, was predictable, staged, and perfect for truth. If I could present the paper trail then, in front of witnesses and the families who were deciding alliances, it wouldn't be a rumor.
It would be proof.
I thought about lawyers and regulators, about anonymous tips and board members. But I wanted the first blow to be mine, personal, unfiltered. I wanted my brother to hear the sound of his lies falling apart from the mouth of the sister he'd mocked. I wanted my parents to watch the consequences of choosing image over integrity. The night before the signing, Olivia handed me the last packet, neat, indexed, impossible to dismiss. Noah had burned copies onto a flash drive and emailed a secure and timestamped version to a neutral third party. Aunt Clara packed a small bag for me, as if I were leaving on a journey. She said, "Bring your courage. Leave nothing else at home." I dressed simply the next morning, not for hiding, but because I wanted my words to be the only thing anyone noticed. I felt strange and clear at once, like someone who had finally learned to breathe underwater. Standing at the doorway before I left, I whispered to myself, "This is for every time they laughed." Then I stepped out, the envelope heavy in my hand, my heart steady and ready. The engagement contract signing was held at the Grand Crystal Hall, chandeliers glimmering, violins humming softly, and guests dressed like they were attending a royal coronation. Every camera, every glance was fixed on Ethan and Lena, the couple everyone called perfect. I walked in quietly, unnoticed at first, my envelope clutched tightly in my hand.
My mother's eyes widened when she saw me. "Maya," she whispered sharply, "why are you here?"
"I told you." "I know," I said calmly, "but I couldn't stay away. After all, it's family business."
Ethan's smirk widened when he spotted me. Well,
the forgotten sister decided to bless us after all." His voice carried across the hall.
Guests chuckled politely. I smiled faintly.
I wouldn't miss this moment for the world. The ceremony began. Speeches, photographs, endless praise. My father's chest swelled with pride as he declared Ethan the future head of the Ross family. And for a moment, it almost looked like they had won. Then Lena's father brought out the documents, the formal signing of the engagement alliance, merging business and marriage in one perfect, public display. Ethan stood tall beside him, ready to sign.
That was my cue. I stepped forward.
Before you sign anything, I said clearly, there's something the families need to know.
The room fell silent. 100 eyes turned toward me. My mother's lips parted in horror. My father's face turned pale. Ethan laughed nervously.
Maya, this isn't the time for your emotional speeches. This isn't about emotions, I said, my voice steady. It's about truth. I walked to the stage, every step echoing. My heels clicked like a countdown. I stopped beside Ethan, pulled the envelope from my bag, and placed it on the table. These, I said, are records of the charity funds you stole to finance this engagement.
Gasps rippled through the hall. Someone dropped a glass. Cameras started flashing.
Ethan froze, color draining from his face.
You're insane, he stammered.
You made that up. Then read them, I said, sliding the papers toward Lena's father. Dates, amounts, transfer IDs.
All leading back to your account, Ethan.
Lena's father flipped through the pages, his expression hardening with every line.
Is this true? He demanded.
Ethan turned to our father. Dad, she's lying. She's trying to ruin me because she's jealous. My father looked torn between anger and fear.
Maya, what is this nonsense?
You're humiliating us. I met his gaze, the same man who taught me to protect the family name at any cost. No, father, I said softly. I'm protecting the truth you refuse to see. Lena ripped off her engagement ring and slammed it onto the table.
You used me, she spat.
You told me you had your father's blessing, not stolen money.
The room erupted.
Reporters whispered, guests began filming. My mother collapsed into a chair, whispering my name like a prayer and a curse at once. Ethan lunged toward me, his voice trembling. You've ruined everything. I stepped back. No, Ethan.
You did that yourself.
I just stopped covering for you. He looked around, desperate, searching for someone, anyone, to defend him.
No one did. Even my father couldn't meet his eyes.
For the first time, the golden boy of the Ross family stood alone. I turned to the audience, my voice calm but unshakable. For years, I've stayed silent to keep peace.
But silence only protects liars.
Tonight, I'm done being invisible. The hall was silent, utterly still, until Aunt Clara started clapping, slow and deliberate. One by one, others joined in, unsure whether it was for courage or for truth. Ethan shouted over the noise. You'll regret this, Maya.
I looked at him one last time.
I already regret wasting so many years protecting you.
Security escorted Lena's family out. Reporters crowded the doors.
And in the chaos, I stood alone, but for once, I didn't feel small. I felt seen. As I turned to leave, I caught my father's eyes. He looked older, smaller, like a man whose pride had finally betrayed him. He whispered, "What have you done?"
I paused.
What you should have done, told the truth. Then I walked out into the night, the sound of applause fading behind me, replaced by something far greater, silence, heavy and honest. The morning after the confrontation, the house that once echoed with laughter felt like a graveyard. The curtains were drawn, the air heavy with silence, and the walls, those same walls that once held portraits of the perfect family, now seemed to stare back in quiet judgment. I walked through the hallway one last time, my footsteps soft but certain. The servants looked at me with a mixture of fear and awe. They'd heard everything, the entire city had. Ethan's scandal was on every news channel, his face plastered across headlines. Ross heir caught in charity fraud. My parents hadn't left their room since dawn. When I reached the door to my father's study, I hesitated. 4 years, I had stood outside that same door, waiting to be invited in, waiting to be seen. Today, I walked in without knocking. He was there, sitting behind his desk, head in his hands. The proud man who once called me a disappointment looked small, defeated. He didn't speak when he saw me. He just stared, eyes red and hollow.
I didn't want to destroy him, I said quietly.
But you left me no choice. He swallowed hard, his voice barely above a whisper. You've destroyed our name, Maya.
I shook my head gently. No, Father.
I saved it. I just tore away the lies you built it on. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The truth hung between us, heavy, but freeing. When I finally turned to leave, he said something I never thought I'd hear. I should have protected you. I paused, my heart twisting, not with pain, but with release. You still can, I replied softly. By learning what love without favoritism really means. Outside, the winter air hit my face like a quiet baptism. For the first time in years, I felt light, not because revenge had been served, but because I had finally let go of the weight of silence. In the days that followed, I packed my things and left the family mansion. The world whispered, gossiped, judged, but I didn't care anymore. I had learned that peace doesn't come from being accepted, it comes from accepting yourself.
Ethan fled the city.
My mother tried to reach out, her voice trembling over the phone.
I listened, but I didn't return home.
Some distances are meant to heal what proximity only hurts. One evening, as I watched the sunset from my small apartment, I thought about everything. The betrayal, the humiliation, the truth that had finally set me free. For years, I believed dignity was something given to you by others, your family, your name, your status. But now I knew, dignity isn't given. It's taken back. Later, when an old friend asked me if I regretted exposing my own brother, I smiled faintly and said, I didn't destroy my family, I ended the illusion that was destroying me. That line stayed with me, echoing like a quiet truth I had waited my whole life to speak. Because in the end, justice isn't always about revenge. Sometimes, it's about reclaiming your voice after years of being silenced. It's about standing alone, not because you have no one left, but because you finally have yourself. And as the last light of day faded into the calm of evening, I whispered to myself, not with pride, but with peace.
They took my name, my place, and my worth, but I took back my truth. And that was everything.